So first of all, thank you for taking the time. I paid your office a visit in New York a few days ago. A lovely office, wooden floors. It felt like an office that you could work late at.
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
It was very comfortable. I also read an article on Medium, and you said something very interesting, or something was quoted in the article which was quite interesting. It said that you noticed that a lot of people were matching, but they weren't connecting. How did you know that, and what did you do about it?
Sure. So, is this? Are you guys hearing me? No. Okay. Cool.
Hi guys.
Hello.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So I think before that question, today it seems like has been a lot about marketing, and we actually do feature ourselves as a product company. So a lot of the stuff that we think about all day is product and user experience and brand and trying to nail that stuff, and we think very little about user acquisition strategy. And so I just feel like I have to preface that because I feel like we're diving straight into a big piece of how we think about dating, how we think about this equation. So yes, as we were tracking user satisfaction, and we were growing really fast through 2013, 2014, into 2015, and we raised a whole bunch of money, and but what we found was that user satisfaction in dating apps, so like the Tinders, Bumbles, Hinges, Happens of the world, in 2015 really like took a sharp turn. They've been increasing, and then all of a sudden they started decreasing. And people felt like, I felt like the initial promise had sort of evaporated. People really felt like these apps were going to be a new way to really connect and find real like human connection, which I think is what people crave. And what it devolved into was just a big casino game online, where you swipe people left and right. It's a pretty objectifying experience, and it is pretty similar to a casino, and especially in that it was essentially, the odds are stacked against you and towards the house in that respect.
But isn't this how Tinder really rose? I mean, the entertainment and the gamification element, it's an amusement.
Yeah, that's right. And to that point, they're also a product company. I mean, it wasn't user acquisition. I think someone talked about that earlier. Like their user acquisition strategy was to go into colleges in Southern California and get fraternities and sororities to sign up, and that is how they got their sort of initial traction. But they didn't go from there to a 100 million user company by going door to door in colleges. And they also didn't really do it through user acquisition plays. They don't really advertise very much. They did it because they had a phenomenal and very different product that was shocking to people and new and caught like wildfire. And so, where was I going with that? Remind me where I went.
Well, I think we're digging down to the philosophy of Hinge, really.
Yeah.
And you being more, product versus marketing. But really, I think if we would do a survey around the room, we'd be hard-pressed to find anybody who really does define themselves as entirely marketing focused. There's always a mix. There's always, we kind of understand that to really deliver on the value, you've got to have a great product. What does that look like, though? So what is the philosophy of Hinge when it comes to products? Your position is more, serious, meaningful relationships. So that's different from Tinder. Tinder is simpler, doesn't ask much of its users.
That's right. I think there's a number of things that are different. I mean, I can go through and talk about each one. I mean, one is match-centric design, right? So Tinder is designed in a way that gets you, it's all about matching. You log in, the first thing you see is more new people, regardless of whether someone just connected with you and is trying to talk with you. You log in and it's like, well, don't worry about that person, here's the next person that you can match with. The way that you have to say yes to someone in order to find out whether they like you back is it's this sort of, it's a gamification mechanic that drives really compulsive behavior, because every time you swipe, you don't know whether this is going to be a match or not, and you get that fun little like it's a match explosion on your screen when it's a match. The business model and the whole way that the app is structured to encourage as many people to use the app as possible, regardless of what their intentions actually are, whether it's just for vanity or for fun or for hookups or for relationships or for marriage. You've got all people in one room all matching with each other, which is very frustrating to our users who are actually looking for relationships. And you had a very objectifying, flat interface that reduced people down to essentially one photo. And so those are all things that we changed with the new Hinge, because we felt like this whole interface is really designed around just creating an addictive game and not around designing a utility that actually helps people who are seeking to find their next relationship. And so I think that there is as big an opportunity where in the world of Tinder to create a big sort of hot or not game, there's this big an opportunity to create a utility for the next generation that it provides a radically different level of service to help people find relationships, and thinks about that from a product perspective, not from a marketing perspective. It's not, in my view, the dog is the product that wags the tail, which is marketing, and that flows through in our metrics, because 80% of our acquisition is totally organic. We don't do anything for it. It comes because our users tell their friends, and because they're having a good experience, and because the press writes about us, and because we work so hard to cultivate that brand and that product that people want to talk about and want to share.
So can you walk us up to the change? I think back in time, there's a couple of examples of super major changes that companies have made. Hot or Not, for example, went from charging to free. I guess they were somewhat inspired by Plenty of Fish, and then they switched back to being paying. And now you went to a all-paid model, $7 a month. Can you walk us through that thought process up to that point, and then what happened afterwards?
So originally we were a free service. So a little bit of background. I started Hinge in 2011 when I was coming out of business school. 2011 was pre-Tinder, the entire dating app sort of culture and world. And I was really just trying to create a way for people to connect. My generation, who just wouldn't talk about or be caught dead really using a dating service. And it felt like, gosh, we all are on Facebook. Most people meet through friends. Wouldn't it be great if you could basically just sort of cruise your friends' online, figure out who that person was that you were eventually going to meet at that wedding 5 years from now, and meet them today. And so Hinge started as this, not too dissimilar from Tinder. We had the same insight as them. And the big product insight, by the way, for Tinder, for Hinge, and all these apps was the one-click sign-up, right? One-click sign-up is what removed all the stigma from the industry and allowed it to bloom with an entire new generation. One-click sign-up meant that I didn't have to pay money, and I didn't have to spend 45 minutes like a desperate person filling out a long profile. I just have to click on this button and then I'm in, oops. And that made it feel so innocent and so easy. And it's what allowed the whole next generation really to blossom. And the one-click sign-up was enabled by Facebook and by geolocation, because now you had some ambient piece of information that the user didn't have to fill out anymore. You just had it by nature. They've already accumulated. You have their location from their phone, or you have their friend network, and I can show you really relevant people based on that without you having to do any work at all. So anyway, so built Hinge. We started to take off in again 2012, 2013, which is the same time that Tinder did. I was a first-time entrepreneur operating independently. Not as good at building a product as they were, didn't have as much backing as they did from the back of the office, and they exploded and built a very good product. Frankly, it worked. It was fast. It was simple, and so we, on the other hand, kind of kept growing among young professionals living in big cities. So among those groups, we were very well saturated among those friend networks. So like a lot of people would ask me like, how much bigger are you than Tinder now? And those would be the types of people who worked at like Goldman Sachs in New York City, because like all their friends were using Hinge and they weren't really using Tinder anymore. Of course, we were like 1/30th the size of Tinder, but we were so well saturated among those networks. The average person would have like 100 friends who were on Hinge, and so we kept growing, and at a certain point, like growth started to slow a little bit. We were still growing though organically on our own, and we got to the point where user satisfaction was tanking, and I personally, like, I got in this business to build something that didn't exist and would actually serve people, and I wasn't doing that anymore. Now we were fighting it out feature for feature with Tinder and Bumble and Happen, and I'm not like adding a lot of value to the world anymore, just providing another competing service. And we got to this point at the end of 2015 where we had like $10 million left in the bank of venture capital money, and I'm like, do I just like close this thing down? Do I what are we even really doing here? I don't think there's an opportunity to get like a 10 or 100x return from my investors at this point. And so we looked at the market, and what we realized though is that there's a ton of users who are using these apps right now, like Tinder, who really, they want something more. They're like very dissatisfied with the experience. They want to find a relationship. They want to find a meaningful connection. They want to get on dates. They're not finding it there, but they won't use Match.com or eHarmony because you could say because you have to pay for it, but actually I think it's much more the brand and it's just not something that is talked about by a lot of 30-year-olds. And so we were like, well, gosh, now here's the opportunity. Create that next generation experience. Create that relationship 2.0 service that would eventually, displace the eHarmonies and Match.coms of the world for the next generation. So that was the vision. And that's when we decided, okay, well, what would that new product look like? It would look different in the ways that I described how the product would look different. It would also have a different business model. You wouldn't try to attract every single person that you could possibly get to sign up to your site. You'd try to attract people who had an intention to meet up, get offline, and find a meaningful connection. And so we accepted this will be a smaller user-based product. We'll monetize a higher ratio of our users than we probably originally expected to. And because paying signals intention. And it's almost the sole value proposition of paying for one of these services, is that by nature of you paying, you're going to be with other people who will pay and are as equally committed to the process.
Yeah. So why did you change back? You started charging, and then you nixed it.
Well, no, we're charging, and
but you were charging everybody, weren't you? $7 a month.
So, we never were charging everyone for $7 a month. I don't know exactly where the future of Hinge is going to go. I want to move in that direction. Right now, if you don't pay, you can still use a limited version that gives you a limited number of likes per day and some limited filters. But really, we're trying to move to a service where people are paying, and certainly a service. And what I'm learning is there are actually ways to cull that user base other than just paying. And so the original idea was we would charge some like millennial-sized price, like $7 a month for this product. That's still going to be a piece of it, but what we're learning is essentially the people who don't pay, there's still some really good people in that group who are actually looking for a relationship and for whatever reason aren't paying, but they are helping the network. And then there's also people who are not contributing to the network and not paying, and therefore like not incredibly great users that we want to keep on the site.
So how are you measuring success? I mean, we've got this bit of a problem in the industry that we don't really have completion of the feedback loop. What's your means, what's your metrics for understanding if it's working?
Yeah, so one is we are looking to complete the feedback loop. So we do know when our users share phone numbers, we can then follow up with them and ask, like, did you end up going on a date with that person? If so, how was it? When someone leaves our site, we email them and we ask them if they've been gone for a month, like, hey, why did you leave? Is it because you found a relationship on Hinge, because you found a relationship elsewhere? And if so, where? Or is it just because you were having a bad experience on Hinge and you left, and if so, why? So we do a lot to complete that feedback loop. We measure success in different ways in different parts of the company, actually. So I mean, ultimately success, we're a business, we're a venture-backed business, so success is revenue and growth. But my philosophy on that, and our philosophy as a company, is that building a good product leads to revenue and growth. And so we have a growth team, we have a member experience team, and we have an engineering team. And our member experience team's main metric is Net Promoter Score, which I don't know if any of you have ever tried to measure Net Promoter Score for a dating website, but it's not pretty. And
but you have outliers, extremes. So if someone's met someone, they're happy.
Yeah,
if
that's
someone's
right.
not met someone, then
yeah. So that's right. So we try to use Net Promoter Score. It's the best proxy that we have. It's really depressing to look at because for those of you not familiar with Net Promoter Score, it's the standard measure of product market fit for like Silicon Valley type companies. You ask someone, how likely are you how likely are you to recommend X product to your friends and colleagues? And then you take the percentage of people who answer 9 or 10, and then you subtract the number of people who answer 0 through 6. And essentially, if you can get more 9s and 10s than 0 through 6s, you've hit product market fit, and that's a really, really good sign. You have virtually no hope of hitting 0 with a dating site because the only people who are using it are people that it hasn't worked for yet. And you have very, very little control over your end product experience. Like, you know, Spotify or Uber, like that song is going to play and that car is going to pick you up. It doesn't matter if you're, you know, rude or unattractive or you're bad at like your profile, but like it doesn't matter. Like the service is going to work for you. And for a dating site like that's obviously not the case.
do you know the NPS for the people that met someone? Are you able to
High, really high, and then they leave the site, right? So like among our users, like
But they'll say nice things about you.
Like it's ranged at various times depending upon like the overall market, anywhere between like -10% and negative like 60%. And but we still use it because we still want to improve it, and it's still a great signal to ask, well, why don't you like Hinge? You know, why did you rate it a 5 or a 3 or a 2? And then they give you feedback about how you can make their experience better, and that's always almost an impossibly high goal for us, but it's how we build.
Surprising feedback you've had among the detractors, the people who are unhappy and didn't meet the right person.
It's not that surprising. It's honestly not that. It's not that surprising. It's kind of what you'd expect to hear from a lot of people. Although it does help us understand certain things about our particular interface and things that people like about it and don't like about it. So our interface looks kind of like Instagram. Instead of swiping on people, you actually browse their profiles and engage with a piece of their content. We encourage people to publish rich content, answer questions, add lifestyle, questions about their lifestyle and that kind of thing. So we just learn about how people are liking that interface, what they aren't liking about it, and it allows us to develop our next product feature to just make that flow better for people.
Gotcha.